folks. Welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online, number 38. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. Apologies for a little delay. We're delayed in getting here, but I am excited to be joined by my special guest. He is CTFazio over at Crown Hoops, doing a great job spreading the Vlatko propaganda. CT, how you doing, man?
Hey, Ryan, doing well. Thanks for having me on. Always great to top on Pickaxe and Roll. I know last time we spoke was the draft. Now we're talking, more Nuggets. So means the season's around the corner. So looking forward to it.
Man, now you just reminded me that Deron Holmes tore his Achilles.
Yeah.
What the hell? We really had to
first game of Summer League too.
Oh my God.
I know. That's on me. On me.
What are you doing? That's a rookie mistake. Rookie move. Dragging away the audience like that. No, that was a very unfortunate time, but it was the right pick at the right time. We were both very excited about it. You remain excited about that one, correct?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. I know the Achilles is definitely a tough injury, long recovery period as well, but knowing Deron, and I think he's going to, work hard and attack his rehab and be ready for next year. But also too, we got Trey Alexander, who had a great Summer League as well. So some positives to take away from the Summer League, at least, considering the injury.
Very excited. I did some minute projections and I debated putting in Trey Alexander into those minute projections, but I really should have done it. I think he's going to earn it, but we'll give it to the vets first and foremost. Have you gotten this comparison before to Boban?
I don't know whether it be insulted or what, but
no. I think it's just the general face shape and the complexion. I think it's a compliment. I don't think it's like insulting or anything, but I can see it. I absolutely can see the complexion for sure.
That's a first for me. I never heard of that before. So
that's funny. Hello, everybody in the comments. Thank you for being patient. Apologies for the delay. 42 Ultra here. Cedric Exquisite in the comments. Noah Linden in the comments. Ari's there. Ari, I see your. Are you JK Kings or whatever on messaging? On Twitter. At RZN King, is that your tag? Because I know I've missed a couple DMs and wanted to make sure to get everybody right. So hopefully you're around, and if you are, thank you for stopping by, and I'll make sure to get back to you for sure. Okay. Before we get into Vlatko Čančar, I want to make sure to pay some bills. This podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From preseason NFL to college kicking off, Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. If you think you know your stuff, get in on their winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. Head on over to their website today. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. I still had the background music playing, so my apologies. Okay. First of all, CT, are you a football fan?
Not really. I play fantasy football.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fun, but not really like too big into like being a fan of any one team. A lot of my friends are Giants and Jets fans, which is pretty unfortunate, but
sorry.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I mean, it should have been a good season last year for the Jets, but just that's a tough scene over there. We'll see if things turn around, but I don't know if you've seen the Mile High Sports like YouTube channel of late. It is a lot of Bo Nix. Just a lot of it. So everybody, I know that if you're a Nuggets fan and if you're double dipping as a Broncos fan, make sure to go check out some of our Broncos coverage. It is really good. And we've got Troy Rank, who is very familiar with the Nuggets and the Rockies, who's also doing Broncos for us. So got a lot of fun things, a lot of fun pieces of content for sure. Okay, it is time. Vlatko Čančar, that is the central question for this podcast. CT, I asked you to see if you would participate in my 20Q series, which is basically 20 questions, 2024-25 Denver Nuggets preseason kind of vibes. Like, hey, We're getting into it. We're still a couple months away, obviously, but I wanted to pace myself and then just keep this going and keep a pretty fast pace. So I wanted to talk to the GOAT. I wanted to talk to the GOAT Vlatko Čančar Stan here. How do you think he's going to do? How do you think he's going to recover from the torn ACL that he sustained during the offseason this last year? We saw him come back for the Olympic qualifiers. He didn't play great, but he was out there. He didn't look like he was too bothered from a movement perspective. And he's got an additional 3 months to sort of get better. So I'm curious to get your takes. Let's start from a macro perspective. Who is Vlatko Čančar to you and to the Nuggets?
Yeah, I think it's been Vlatko's career has been definitely up and down with the Nuggets, and I think honestly, if you really look at his career from a distance, him being a second round pick at I think 49, I believe he was drafted, and same draft as Monte, and that he's been able to. Of course, there's been the notion that he's friends with Jokic. So that's been a bit of a reason why he's been on the roster. But me being a draft guy, him like actually sticking in the NBA for this long as a second round pick in his draft. I mean, I'm sure if you go back to 2017's class, the second round crop is probably faded out of the NBA by now for the most part. So for Vlatko to kind of stick in the NBA, albeit as like a fringe rotation guy, I think is kind of an accomplishment, in and of it itself. So I think last year was probably slated to be the year for Vlatko to be a rotation contributor. And unfortunately, he tore his ACL before the season. And that kind of snowballed actually like in the whole Nuggets rotation, I think last year as well after his injury. So I think this year coming up, he's going to have another chance again to kind of prove himself to whether that's to stick in the rotation or maybe even come back again, after his 1 year is up on his deal that he just signed this summer.
I'm very curious. Like you said, he had a team option heading into this season. They declined it, but then they re-signed him, I believe, to a minimum contract. That was expected. Everything was kosher there. I think the team, they still believe in him. They still believe in what he provides, not just on the court, but off the court as well. And I'm very curious to see how he responds, because in that last season that he was healthy, going back and looking at some of the minutes, he played the 9th most minutes on the roster, like outside of, I think maybe Bones played more, but then he didn't finish the season on the roster. So don't really count that. He was the 9th man on the team behind Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown, who all were in the playoff rotation. So 9th man in an 8-man rotation. And I don't think that was by accident, honestly. I think he's a versatile forward who could do a lot of different things, played 60 games for the team, nearly 15 minutes a night. And he's not going to fill up the stat sheet on you, but he's going to be an all-around contributor. And I think we saw that in his last healthy season. So I'm curious to see whether he can bring that back.
Definitely. No, I think, going back to that year where he was probably his breakout year, you could say, 22, 23, where they won the championship. He was better than Jeff Green for majority of that year until Vlatko got injured, and then Jeff kind of got reinserted back into the lineup. And then Malone kind of rolled with Jeff through the playoffs, which obviously was the right move since they won the championship. But I think that year Vlatko really showed, and we kind of saw it this year, right? You look at the bench that the Nuggets had; it was basically Peyton Watson playing the 4, surrounded by non-shooters a lot of the time. You had Reggie, of course, but he's gone now. You had Christian, who teams, he's not a runoff guy. Strawther was in and out of the rotation. Holiday was a guy you had to really kind of guard at the 3-point line, maybe, but you're kind of going to live with some of the shots that he hits. And then DJ or Zeke as the backup 5, and the Nuggets were just missing shooting. In that lineup off the bench, we saw that in the playoffs. Like the Nuggets had no other guy they could go to. Say if AG teams weren't guarding him, there was no other guy the Nuggets could go to other than playing Mike at the 4. But then there was like a vacancy on the perimeter. So I think Vlatko's skill set is very helpful as far as what the Nuggets need in the front court. As far as like another wing you could throw out there, a bigger wing, pretty strong as well. And then obviously that year he shot 37% from 3 on 115 makes I saw. So, decent sample there. 9 starts he had 93% from the free throw line, which is a pretty good indicator for the 3-point percentage as well. So I think next year going forward, like I know a lot of people are kind of, I wouldn't say out on him maybe, but are a bit skeptical about him. I do think he fills a position of need in the front court, and especially on the wing, where you compare him with AG, you compare him with Mike, right? And I think it kind of makes a lot of sense from a schematic, but also to like a positional, versatile standpoint. So,
And you could also pair him with Peyton Watson. I feel
yep,
like
definitely.
that's one where we'll talk about, especially in the second segment. But between all of Denver's forwards, there's really no pairing that doesn't make much sense. You can find ways where all of those four can play next to each other and be pretty realistic with that. A couple numbers, especially on that 3 point percentage. I do want to note that he shot 52.2% from three until December 31st. And then
It's crazy.
after January 1st, he shot 27.5. I don't know if he just caught a heater. I don't know if the attempts were about the same, I believe, for each of those. So I'm not necessarily going to say one way or the other. But what I will say is that the Nuggets were 6-3 when he started, and they were 15-3 when he played at least 20 minutes. So
Wow.
he can play, and the Nuggets can have a positive plus minus with him out there. I will say on the whole, just additional numbers: positive plus minus in 21 games, even in four of them, and negative in 35. Although he was only double digit negative in six of those games. So he's still within range. And especially with the way that Denver's bench was that year, especially during the regular season, I'm not really surprised by that. Uh,
Right.
the point being is that they can win games while he plays. They can. There's no question about it. And if there is an opening, which I think there will be this season, then I expect him to compete for something.
Hmm. Definitely. No, I think those are great numbers that you found, especially from that year. Um, I think, that was kind of really showed like that the Nuggets, especially last year, missed his minutes. Like I said, they didn't have a versatile guy they could throw out there. Like there was no optionality, which was the problem. Why the Nuggets kind of lost in the playoffs, other than the starting five. There was no kind of guy you could throw out there to say, hey, let's get another shooter out there. Let's play five out. Let's play a couple more. Let's play another passer out there, or another forward you could throw and maybe be a little bit more physical on a Carl Towns or a maybe a LeBron, for instance, right? But let's
Sure.
I think, like you said with Watson, I think that's a really nice combination as well. And him playing next to Dario is pretty intriguing to me. Two guys that you play out there with plus passers, uh, both kind of seem like they're going to be good shooters next year. We'll see how that kind of goes, but I do like the combination of Watson. I know you said we're going to talk about the rotation. I just from the offset, I do
Sure.
like the rotation trio of Watson, Vlatko, and Dario. I think that's a pretty versatile mix, combined with athleticism and some passing, as well.
I will say that there are a couple of reasons to at least be skeptical coming off of a torn ACL. He looked a little stiff in the Olympics, not necessarily that crazy, but he still looked a little bit unsure. I will say he's got 3 full months between when the Olympic qualifiers happened and until the regular season actually starts. But things that I'm going to be watching for: his side to side movement, his explosiveness, his defense, how he gets up and down the floor. Does he tire out really quickly? There are things that I think he'll probably be okay heading into age 27 season, but that's really kind of the threshold of, okay, is the explosiveness, is the actual burst going to start going down here? And it already wasn't great overall for Vlatko. He was still a little bit of a stiff player, stiff ball handler. I still think that he can do some things, but I think it's important to temper expectations, despite the fact that there are reasons for optimism too. It's just, I think we have to know, hey, he's probably not going to be in the main top eight, main top even nine, I would expect. And we can get into sort of where he fits into that pecking order soon.
Definitely, yeah. I think with we saw with Murray, right, coming off the torn ACL, he kind of got like a year and a half to come back, right? Because
Yeah.
he was out like toward the later part of the season when he got injured, and then he was out like the full year, and then he came back in 22, 23. So Vlatko basically tore his ACL in the summertime last year, and then he just came back for the qualifier. So I don't know if he even got like the full year to really recover and then come back. So pretty quick kind of recovery period there. And then we saw with Murray too, like he was out for that long and he was pretty rusty the first couple of games, or like Jokic said, like he's gonna be bad for the first month or two. of the season. I think he's probably going to say the same thing about Vlatko once you get to training camp as well. But I wasn't surprised that he didn't look great in the qualifiers. I thought, like you said, he showed a bit of flashes, here and there. Funny enough, he actually played against Saric in the qualifiers. And
Saric looked good.
Really well. No, Saric looked really good. Saric looked really good in the qualifiers. But I thought, like you said, Vlatko showed some flashes, a little bit of creation flashes, because he has more of a role in Slovenia than what he's going to have on the Nuggets. But I do think some of the movement was encouraging that we saw, but it's going to be a process for him to get up to speed. So I wouldn't be surprised if either he's like not playing immediately in the rotation or if he's kind of slow out of the gate. But I like I said before, I do like his skill set, being able to kind of, facilitate what the Nuggets were missing last year.
Let's ask this question from Jose. What do you think are Vlatko's best attributes? Like, what is he going to bring to the table for this team? I know you've already mentioned it a little bit, but what are you most excited for him to bring that the team was sort of missing maybe last year?
For sure. I think definitely the shooting, definitely, because we saw last year in the playoffs, Nuggets couldn't go 5 out really with Gordon, and Gobert was, like we saw, was hovering around the paint, being that roamer that we saw. But I think too, like Vlatko would be a guy who could, now with KCP out, it's kind of tougher to go 5 out unless you play Strawther at the 2 guard spot. But I do think Vlatko, he just like kind of knows how to play. He's a guy who's like not going to be rattled, like low mistake player. I think the shooting probably is something that teams are I'm not going to say he's a runoff guy, but teams will respect his jump shot. And he's a plus passer as well. He knows how to get Jokic the ball. Pretty good synergy there as far as like pick and roll play if needed. Vlatko's pretty good cutting off of Jokic as well. I was kind of watching some of, the minutes that he had with Jokic in 22-23, and I really like the cutting that he had. He just knew where to be around Jokic. And I think, like we saw last year, the Nuggets were missing a lot of those kind of experienced players because they went more younger with their rotation. But I just think shooting for sure in the front court, the Nuggets were missing. I like his fit, especially next to Mike as another shooter. Pretty bulky, strength wise as well. Nuggets Watson guarding fours didn't really go over too well last year. So I think Vlatko in the mix will be pretty good there. He's not like a stopper by any means, but at least he's, competent, defensively in that aspect. So I think those are probably the 3 biggest attributes. We'll see if it, he could kind of be not like a jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe you could just kind of see if the shooting sticks and maybe some of the positional versatility.
I think maybe the theory of Vlatko would have really helped them in that series last year against Minnesota,
right,
where you get somebody who can be a little bit more physical against a Karl Anthony Towns, against a Rudy Gobert, is not going to give up so much size in those switch situations, but can switch out a little bit on the perimeter. He's not going to be your Anthony Edwards stopper. You're going to run out double teams a little bit, but it's still
he's the Shea stopper though.
Still the Shea stopper. That is never going to die, and I hope it never does. I really, really hope. But no, I think just the theory of him, where you get somebody who can't be left like an Aaron Gordon, but can also be as strong as an Aaron Gordon or somewhere similar to that, just from a physicality standpoint on the defensive end, that would be really, really helpful. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see how it goes, and I'm curious to see what he brings to the table. Tell you what, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to do minute expectations for this rotation, kind of where Vlatko fits into that. Should be a lot of fun. We will be right back. All right, back at it. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Continuing our 20Q series on Vlatko Čančar with our guy CTFazio, who's doing great work for Crown Hoops. Also, just resident Nuggets resident Nuggets truther online, and always providing some really good context. Your socials are blowing up, man. You're starting to become pretty popular over there on the old X app.
I appreciate it. Thanks to you though. Thanks to you with, getting me on the podcast and inviting me on. Appreciate it for sure.
Oh, it's all deserved. I wouldn't be inviting you on if you didn't deserve it already. So
appreciate it.
All right, let's do minute expectations. I wanted to talk about this, and I think there are some important numbers that I can share here. I went back through the last 3 years of Michael Malone rotations. just in terms of total minutes played, average minutes played per game for each guy, and then each of the different spots in the rotation. How much did Bruce Brown play one year as the sixth man versus how much did the eighth man play in each of those years, and things like that. Like how many minutes on average is the shooting guard position going to play, which I think is important for Christian Brown and kind of evaluating what he's going to be. Center spot, Jokic is going to average about 2,500 minutes. Like that's probably what he's going to play, and he'll probably play about 34 minutes a night. Power forward, Aaron Gordon's about 31 minutes per game. Michael Porter, Jeff Green, actually, I'm doubling those two because Michael Porter missed the 2022 season, basically. So I know Jeff didn't play as many minutes in that year, but I'm going to pencil in Michael Porter for about 30 minutes a night. And even though he played more this year, I just think it's important that people don't expect Michael Porter to play 81 games again this upcoming season. Just like let's be smart about it, people. Let's try to get some built-in rest here and not play him 2,500 minutes on the regular season. That was probably something that they could have changed. Will Barton and KCP, like together, they averaged about 2,300 minutes, about 31, 32 minutes per game for the shooting guard position. Jamal Murray, Monte Morris, about 31 minutes per game, 2,080 minutes total on average. The sixth man is where it gets interesting, and this is where we could start talking about these bench guys. I'm curious who you would pick to be the sixth man this year. Like who would be the guy that leads that group in minutes? Which player makes sense? And let's kind of go from 6 to 10 or so and try to figure out where Vlatko fits in.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I would probably say a combination of Russ as a sixth man, Russ, or this might shock some people. I think Strawther is probably in that mix as well. The thing is, like, I would say Watson, but I think that Mike and AG are pretty interchangeable as far as like you can play Mike at the 4 if you want, and then you can slot Strawther in, and he could play as like a little undersized 3 next to CB. I think that kind of makes some more sense, just having 2 more shooters out there. For me, I don't like the Watson and Brown fit personally, unless you're really playing a lot of spacing. So if you have Jokic, Murray, and Porter out there, I like that lineup. Like we saw in that Timberwolves game, like in the regular season, where they really kind of blew them out at the end of that game. But I would say probably Russ or Strawther would be, and then Sarge is like further out because I think Jokic is going to play like the bulk of the minutes. So probably Russ or Strawther, I would say, because I think those guys are pretty interchangeable as far as like you could slot either one next to Murray if you want. You could play Russ instead of Murray. You could play Strawther in CB spot or Mike spot, or you could have Mike slide down to the 4 with Strawther at the 3. Like I just think there's a lot more optionality when it comes to those two guys.
So you're not on the Peyton Watson train, huh?
I'm a fan of Peyton Watson. I think he's going to be a big contributor. Definitely a big year for him. If the Nuggets are going to contend for a title, they're going to have to get a leap from him. But more so with the spacing options the Nuggets have now, I'm kind of a bit more skeptical as far as like inserting him in as like the default sixth man.
I understand why. I honestly just think that it's got to happen. And I think it's one of those things where Denver's ceiling really took a hit. I don't know if you caught the last pod I did on Peyton, but
I did. Yep.
He just kind of going through the numbers there. I have him now projected. Let me just see if I can pull it up. I have him projected to be the sixth man and playing like 22 and a half minutes per game, which is about 4 minutes per game more than he played previous year. And I think it's going to be very fascinating to see, like, they're going to have to stagger Mike. They're going to have to stagger Aaron. They're going to have to stagger a little bit more with these guys. But in addition to that, like, they're going to play those guys a little bit less. And I think, like, you're probably, if you play Mike 70 games, then that's 11 more games of small forward minutes that need to be filled. And right. Aaron, same thing. Like, I don't know if he'll play about 73. That seems pretty reasonable. But if he plays about 70, it's another little bit of games that can be played and that Peyton can actually start in. So I think that they should be trying to build him up so that he could be a shooter. Whether they can do that, whether they can get away with that or not is a fair question. But Denver's got to get his defense into the lineup more frequently. And that to me is where, like, if you're asking for a ceiling, like how does Denver improve their ceiling? Peyton
Yeah,
Watson is the easy answer for me. Like he's the only one that makes sense
definitely.
to me, other than maybe Strother.
I think his floor too is something last year we kind of saw in the playoffs where his floor wasn't high enough to play, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, and like you said, I think you made your last part about Watson was great. What do you think about him? I'm like in on the Brown starting at shooting guard just because I think he's more of a better shooter than Watson for sure. I just like the cutting a little bit more, and his defense, I think, against guards is pretty good. I just think he probably not knows, but I just like his ability more to play with Jokic than what I've seen from Watson. But what do you think about Watson at the two guard spot, starting or maybe like spot starting or playing some minutes there? What do you think about that lineup? Because it's pretty tall perimeter with Watson, MPJ, AG at those three spots is 6'8" and above.
I think it would be fantastic. And the reason why is because Jokic loves tall cutters. He loves tall, physical, athletic players that can, as long as they're willing to move, as long as they're willing to play, as long as they're willing to run, and I think that Watson would be willing to do that, then they're going to find opportunities that if they get stops, then they get out and run. And like, if you can get a guy out there in Watson who not only can be one of your defensive stoppers on the perimeter, like imagine him in that place instead of Christian. Both of those guys, I think, are like four guarding guards specifically are about the same, but like Watson has the capability to go even higher than that. So
Yep.
I think that there is some more versatility that you can get on the defensive end with him out there. And if he is a little bit more capable as enough that like as a shooter, he's got a little bit more game with the ball in his hands, a little
Yep.
like
Definitely.
than Christian does. So I think you could run some DHOs with him, have him try to set up Jokic over the top, things like that. It's not going to be anything crazy. He's still going to be your fifth option in that lineup, but I
Right.
think that that can really, really work. Which is why, like, hey, find every excuse to play him a little bit more. Find every possible excuse that you can.
Yeah, I think his minutes of the two is pretty intriguing. Just being a bigger, like you said, a bigger target, um, a guy who obviously is lockdown defender, we could say, especially 1-on-1, really good rim protector.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you read an article from John, John Charks, the great John Charks,
Yep.
rest in peace to him. He actually had a piece back in the day where he said like you should kind of surround Jokic and Murray and Mike with like elite defenders, and I think Watson and AG fit that bill. So I think that'd be a really interesting kind of lineup where you have obviously three offensive guys, and then two guys who are like not all NBA, but like really, really dynamic defenders. I just think that kind of makes more positional and more schematic sense, like you said.
100%. Sorry, I'm gonna fix that guy. Um, all right. No, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what he provides and then like how they sort of build that out. Um, Bringing this back to the bench and like bench minutes, last 3 years, Austin Rivers, Bruce Brown, Reggie Jackson, they averaged about 1,800 minutes, 24 minutes per game. That's dragged up by Bruce Brown. I think it's going to be closer to 22 for whoever plays that role, whether that's Russell Westbrook, where he played 22 per game last year for the Clippers. I have Russ at about 20 because seventh man for Denver was at about 19 to 20 minutes per game. Eighth man is where we could start really having some questions as to whether this is going to be Vlatko, whether this is going to be somebody else. 17.4 minutes per game, about 1,285 minutes on average. Facu Campazzo, shout out. Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, those were the three guys over the last 3 years that played that role. I would assume that for me, the top 3 to 4 guys that are going to play every night are Peyton Watson, Russell Westbrook, Dario Saric, and Julian Strother. Like
Yep.
those to me make the most sense as a consistent quartet that is pretty balanced, in my opinion. Um, Even though you're the Vlatko guy, do you disagree?
No, I agree. I definitely agree, especially at the offset. With Vlatko's injury coming back, I think Malone's going to ease him into the rotation. But yeah, I would definitely agree with those top 4 guys being off the bench. I think the bench this year, obviously KCP is a big loss. I'm kind of writing about that right now. I have like an article coming out within the coming weeks. I think KCP is obviously a huge loss, but I do like the bench is a bit more coherent this year than what we saw last year. And I like the combinations that they could play more so than last year. So I think that's kind of been the trade-off where the bench makes more sense. Like you said, that top 3, Strother, Watson, Russ, pretty versatile combinations you could play compared to last year. With Reggie, kind of limited the flexibility with playing with Jamal. Watson and Brown next to each other didn't really fit as far as from a spacing perspective. So, yeah, I definitely agree with those top 3 or 4 guys. With Sarge being like the, Jokic guy to spell him when he's out. So definitely agree there.
And now we can move over to Vlatko again. Cedric with the super chat asks, if Vlatko doesn't play, will Moch play Sarge more? It's going to be fascinating. Like you talked about the combination of those two a little bit early on. Can Vlatko slide over and play some backup 5, do you think? Like, is that in the cards for a team like this?
I think he could. It depending on who like they're playing against as far as the matchups are concerned. Like they're playing against like the Warriors, who they play small a lot. I think maybe it's a possibility. I know the Heat like to play small when Bam's not on the floor, so like that could be a lineup.
Sure.
I think like Vlatko would have to play next to a Mike and maybe a Watson, just to have like bigger kind of forward options next to him. But I think it's a possibility. Vlatko kind of showed in the past that he plays bigger than his size, but
Yeah.
definitely gonna have to be more matchup dependent, I think.
To me, Cedric, I assume that Sharch is going to get the first draw for all of those matchups, even over Vlatko. Like I have to imagine that he'll be the penciled in backup center, and he might even come in as a backup power forward and play next to Jokic at the end of the first, end of the third quarter times, and then slide over to the 5 when Jokic exits. That's kind of how I'm approaching the rotation at this point. I don't know whether that's what's ultimately going to happen, but I think that Saric, his minutes aren't necessarily too impacted by Vlatko's health, I don't think.
Yep, I agree there. Do you think Dario could play next to Jokic, or you think that's problematic from a defensive perspective? And like maybe Watson, if he's playing on the wing, could kind of cover for those guys, but I'm not really too optimistic about it. But what do you think about that?
It's a good question. I think that there's a place for it. There's a time and a place for it. The problem was in like you look at every Golden State message board or any time that they were complaining about Sharch, he wasn't playing by the end. He was a DNP CD, and it was his mobility, especially on the defensive end, that was a real issue. And you put him not only at the 5 but at the 4, and yes, he will be a smart defender, but there are some things that like Denver's going to have him cover in space if he's playing power forward, maybe even a little bit more than center. So like is what they'll do. And they'll probably do the same thing that they do with Jokic is they'll play him up at the level. And yes, he'll play in space, but they'll have some rotations behind him with a Peyton Watson, maybe even a Zeke Naji in that second unit. So I don't think that it's going to be a staple of their lineups. Like I would personally prefer for them to play Watson, play Strother, play all those guys as much as possible with Jokic, rather than trying to invest a whole bunch of time with Saric next to him. But you could go with that combination against the Wolves and wouldn't necessarily be that bad.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with the Wolves in particular, because they play so many big guys. I think if you play with like together they play. So if you play like Dario and Jokic, like that's the spacing that you need, right? Like Dario could kind of space the floor for Jokic. I think that's a matchup where that could probably work. Then you have like 3 guys who could shoot with Mike and Dario and Jokic. I mean that lineup probably is outmatched athletically, unfortunately. But
yeah, I was just trying to imagine like, okay, which of Jokic or Dario Saric is going to be guarding Naz Reid or Karl Anthony Towns in the perimeter? Like,
yeah, that's a problem.
How are they going to run that defense? I don't know. So that's a tough matchup. What they really need is for Aaron Gordon to consistently play that, and honestly, they need Mike to slide over to the 4 and have Watson slide into the 3. Like that's what I would do if I were them, and they need Watson to be ready. So you find more opportunities to get him ready is what I would say. Okay. Couple more here. The ninth man for Denver generally plays about 15 minutes per game, and the 10th man plays about 13.5. I think that we're kind of in that range for Vlatko in either one of those two spots. Though I
Yep.
can make an argument that Zeke Naji should play that 10th man spot over Vlatko Čančar. I don't know if I necessarily want to make that argument, but what I will say is just going back and looking through the data, Zeke Naji was the 10th man each of the last 3 years. 2022, 2023, 2024, he was
Wow.
the 10th man. And that might change given that they just added Charge and they don't necessarily have to play Zeke. But you kind of want some athleticism and some defense, and he can provide a little bit of that defensive front court kind of bolstering, if you will. Although the spacing with them is not going to be good, so I think that's probably your pick your poison thing, right? Like with Vlatko, your spacing will be good. With Zeke, your spacing will be bad, but your defense will be better. I'm curious whether Vlatko fits a little bit better just as a higher IQ player. Where are you at with Zeke versus Vlatko for backup power forward minutes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had a couple people in my mentions. I was kind of talking about like the bench minutes. A lot of people in my mentions think that Zeke should play over Vlatko, which I think there's somewhat of an argument for. I actually was doing a bit of digging before coming on the pod. So no Jokic in 22-23 season when Vlatko was healthy. The combo of Vlatko, Zeke, and Murray was a +8 in 87. It's small sample, 87 minutes without Jokic on the floor. But it's still pretty intriguing that those three were in the positives at least with Jokic off the court, because we know if Jokic off, the Nuggets usually get obliterated. But I do think that's interesting where like Vlatko actually did aid Zeke as far as his skill set was concerned, like kind of making it fit as far as like that 4-5 combination. And I think last year we saw with Zeke, I mean, he obviously had a tough year, but I do think that the front court combos didn't really help him out either. Playing next to Watson and Brown was just a tough trio of shooting, which was pretty non-existent. So I personally would pick Vlatko to play over Zeke. And it's pretty, I don't know about controversial is the word, but he's like the 5th highest paid player on the roster at this point, Zeke is. So I don't know if like he's just going to get the minutes regardless, but I do think that Vlatko from a skill set perspective, him and Dario, like 2+ passers, could shoot. And I like Vlatko and Watson's ability as not interchangeable forwards, but more versatile perimeter guys on the wing as well. And I think the Nuggets, they don't have a shortage of wings, which is a good kind of situation to have. So I'd lean Vlatko over Zeke, but I probably would put maybe Zeke could play next to Dario at times, but I also don't like the combo of Russ, Watson, and Zeke. I think that's like a pretty bad spacing combo where I think Vlatko just makes more sense as far as like a 5-man lineup.
Yeah, definitely not great. I do think that there is a world though where something that we're not talking about is, let's say the Charge signing just doesn't work out. Like I had him pegged as a minimum signing, as a minimum contract guy, and he got the full taxpayer MLE from Denver. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure whether that was the right decision. It might have just been what it cost in order to get him, but I think that there is at least a world where Charge doesn't work out, and there was a reason why Golden State wasn't playing him by the end, and they decide to go, like Denver decides to go Vlatko Zeke off their bench over the course of the like second half of the season. That wouldn't surprise me. There is a world where Vlatko can play for sure. There's also a world where he doesn't play. There's a world where he's a spot rotation guy, kind of like he's been throughout his career. I think the Nuggets, fortunately, they have at least enough bodies in their front court that they can slow play it just in case it doesn't work out. But if he does like showcase something, then like they'll probably give Zeke the first opportunity for that reason, for the money. But I think that there is a world where Vlatko actually comes in and contributes, and maybe he's a guy that you're asking, does he have to play in the playoffs? Is he a player that you need to play in a positive way because of how he has looked and because of how things function while he's out there?
Yeah, in his last year, when he was healthy, a lot of the talk was, is Vlatko basically a penciled-in playoff guy?
Yeah.
Then he got injured, unfortunately. But also, to another point that I was kind of looking at as well for last year was that the Nuggets, they lost Bruce off the bench, and they didn't really have a capable replacement because Reggie didn't. I mean, he was fine in the regular season, but playoff wise, it didn't work out. The Nuggets, like, they lost Jeff Green for last year, but they also lost Vlatko. So they were also down 2 guys in that front court as far as like additional wings to kind of play. So I think that was also another issue that they had where, you know, they were just down bodies and more like playable vet options. So I think, you know, with the addition of Saric, Russ, Vlatko coming back, I just like the bench a lot more this year than last year.
Yeah, just got a little bit more options. I think that it would be nice to have Deron Holmes as an option too. Like, that would be great. I would be very, very excited about where the bench would be if he was out there just playing a little bit more consistently. But hopefully his recovery goes pretty well and we can talk about him positively in the future. But for now, I don't think I have anything else, man. Is there anything else you want to cover about the rotation or Vlatko specifically?
Yeah, no, I think we hit on a lot of stuff with the rotation with Vlatko as well. I think he's going to be a pretty integral part of the bench and some of the starter minutes. Actually, I had one more stat here too. So
Sure.
Vlatko, MPJ, and Jokic in that year, 22-23, plus 17 and 188 minutes. So I think, you know, obviously the combos with Jokic are great, but I in that particular combination, I like the shooting ability and the versatility there. So, yeah, no, I like the bench a lot more this year. You know, obviously I think the top end with the starters is definitely in question, but definitely need Christian and like you said, Payton to take another step forward, and Strawther as well, take another step forward for them to all you know, get back in the mix for that first seed. But I'm looking forward to opening night. Vlatko hopefully locks down Shea like we saw in the year prior. So should be a fun first game.
Should be fun. I'm looking forward to the Thunder and Stopper Man himself to pop in and shut down SGA. That would be great. We will see. We'll see what ultimately happens. But the Slovenian cyborg, man, would be excited to see him back out there on the floor, and then hopefully he's got a good season for him in the Nuggets. We will just have to wait and see. He is CTFazio at Crown Hoops. Make sure to check out all of CT's work. Make sure to also give him a follow on the socials, because that dude is popping off and doing some great stuff for the Nuggets as a result. CT, good to see you, man.
You too, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the season coming up, you know, in the coming months.
It's going to be fun. All right, everybody, that's going to do for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out. I'll probably be back next week, although I can't promise. Like, maybe there is a podcast over the weekend, although I've got some obligations. We will just have to wait and see. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one. Peace.